Hello, this is Dr. Colin Ross, and I'd like to talk to you about the importance of using the glycemic index not only to achieve your health goals, but to maintain your health goals. So if your health goal is to lower your blood pressure, lower your body weight, decrease your waist size, lower your risk of developing diabetes type 2, or lower your risk of developing any disease overall, you want to consume on a regular and consistent basis foods that are low in their glycemic index. More important than the caloric content of a food is the glycemic index. For the glycemic index always tells us the truth about a food. If you look on the chart, pancakes are a high glycemic index food. Whether they're wheat pancakes, oat pancakes, whole grain pancakes, they're a high glycemic index food. This does not mean you can never eat pancakes, but it means if you eat pancakes every day for, say, breakfast on a regular, consistent basis, this will not help you to reach or maintain your goal of lowering your blood pressure, lowering your waist size, lowering your risk of developing diabetes, or decreasing your risk overall of developing disease. Pancakes, maybe they're fine on the weekend, but it's not a food you want to consume on a regular and daily basis. The glycemic index tells us that foods that we may have thought were bad for us actually turned out to be pretty good. So for example, on the chart, peanut butter and plain yogurt are low glycemic index foods, and low-fat ice cream is also another lower glycemic index food. How could you use this on a practical basis? Let's say you have a child that loves to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. The glycemic index tells us that on our sandwich we should put more peanut butter and less jelly. Because if we want that child to lower their body weight, lower their risk of developing disease, lower their risk over lifetime of developing obesity and all of the other diseases that come with it, not only is it good for the child to eat more peanut butter and less jelly, but it's also a good practice for the parent. The glycemic index also answers the question about what is the best sugar substitute or sweetener. There are many of them out there on the market, but looking at the glycemic index, it shows us that the use of raw bees honey versus refined sugars of any form are a better option. Because if we want to lower our body weight, lower our risk of developing diabetes, it is best that we consume raw bees honey versus refined sugars. The glycemic index even shows us the way we prepare our foods will affect what they do to our bodies when consumed. So for example, if you noticed, baked foods are better than fried foods, even if it's the same food. If you look at the glycemic index, baked potato chips are a lower glycemic index food versus fried potato chips. Check out baked versus boiled versus fried. So, how do we use this on a practical basis? If you have a child or you're having a party where you want to have chips, instead of just having all baked potato chips, because then you may lack flavor, or having all fried potato chips where you may have flavor but are increasing your risk of developing disease, well, how about if we had half baked chips mixed with half fried chips, so you get the flavor but also the health benefit? The glycemic index tells us the best way to prepare our foods is baked or broiled, and try to avoid frying our foods as much as possible. Another principle is the glycemic index shows us that foods are best consumed in their natural form. For example, a raisin is just a grape that has been dried. Now, how do we use this on a practical basis? Anyone ever drink prune juice to help them when they had some minor constipation? Prunes come from plums that have been dried and produce a high sugar content. So using the glycemic index, it tells us that we're better off consuming the food in its natural form, because the minute we begin to process it, it becomes a higher glycemic index food. So therefore, we're increasing our risk of developing diabetes, increasing our risk of developing disease overall. So it's best to consume foods in their natural form. So if you're presented with the option of eating, say, fruit roll-ups versus the actual fruit, the glycemic answers the question for you, which form of that food is better for your overall metabolic health. The glycemic index can even teach us how to take a bad food and make it better. Now, pizza is not the best thing that one should eat all the time, but when you have a party or get together, hey, we want to order some pizza. The glycemic index shows us that we could choose toppings that are low in glycemic index to balance out the bad damage that that food is possibly doing to our body. So on our pizza, we want to choose broccoli, tomatoes, or things from the low glycemic index. But look at this. If we add pineapple to our pizza, we're already adding more calories and a higher glycemic index food to a food pizza, which we know we shouldn't consume a lot of. The glycemic index also tells us which breakfast items are actually good for me to eat. And as you notice, in the high glycemic index chart, you will see some foods that we thought were very healthy for us, but might not be as healthy as we thought before. The glycemic index even shows us that foods that are healthier, certain foods, have a glycemic load content, meaning that if we increase the amount of that healthy food eaten, now it becomes a higher glycemic index food. So look at brown rice. Brown rice is better than white rice, according to our glycemic index chart. But when we start eating 1, 2, and 3 scoops of brown rice, then it moves from a low to moderate glycemic index food to a higher glycemic index food, therefore causing metabolic damage to our bodies. So in conclusion, the glycemic index shows us that foods which are low in the glycemic index, and here on this chart you see just a small sample of the thousands of foods that are low in glycemic index, will help us to lower our risk of developing disease. So if you would like to lower your blood pressure, lower your risk of developing diabetes type 2, lower your risk of developing cancer, lowering your waist size, consume on a frequent and consistent basis foods that are low in the glycemic index.